It really doesn't matter what kind of a database you're building in Microsoft Access. The data itself is the foundation, so it's extremely important that that data be accurate and consistent. Take, for example, multiple people entering data into a table in Microsoft Access, and one person likes to enter dates one way, and someone enters dates another way. We want to make it so that everybody inputs a date the exact same way to enforce the integrity of our data. We don't want to lose that. Well, there's a number of different ways for us to enforce data integrity in Microsoft Access, and we're going to look at them in this chapter. We're going to start with the field properties for one and see how we can force people to enter data a certain way. We're going to look at input masks as well to narrow that down even further, and validation rules a little bit later as well. So let's start with the field properties. And you can see I'm using Music Library 4A here. I got it from the Lesson 4 folder of the exercise files. It should look familiar to you if you've been following along. Here's a table that has album ID, title, artist. There's a rating in here, which is a numeric field. We've got condition, location, and media. So we're going to focus in on this rating field here. We want to make sure that people are inputting the right numbers the right way. So let's start with the field properties. The easiest way to get to the design view is to come up here from the Home tab on the ribbon and click the Design View button right here. We don't need to click the drop down below, which includes Design View, but Design View shows up right up here at the top, and clicking that will switch us to the Design View quickly. You'll notice that it's now the Datasheet icon that shows up over the View button, and I can switch back to Datasheet View quickly, going back and forth using this button. Now in the bottom right hand corner on the status bar, you'll also find the Design View button and the Datasheet View buttons, along with the other two, and the one that's currently selected is highlighted, which is our Datasheet View. So let's switch back to Design View. That's where we want to work on the field properties. And like I said, we're going to focus in on this rating field, which is a number data type. So I'm going to click anywhere in here in the rating field, and down below I'll see the field properties for that field. Now, the first thing that jumps out at me is the very first thing here, field size set to long integer, and that means I can put in numbers up to 64 characters long. Well, my rating system's from 1 to 5, so I'm using up a lot of space here in my table that won't be used. So I'm going to click in here where it says long integer. I'm going to slide over to the right, click the drop down, and I'm going to go to single. There we go. With single now, I know I'm going to save some space, and I'm only going to be putting in single digits, so this one works perfectly. The format down below now is empty, and if I click down here and click the format drop down, I can choose from a number of predefined formats. Well, it's definitely not a dollar amount that's going in there. It's not a percent. It's not a scientific number that's going in there. It's really just a fixed number, so I can use this one here right in the middle, fixed. So I'll give that a click, and it shows up now in the format field. Decimal places, we know we're not going to need any. It's set to auto by default, so I'm going to click the drop down here and change that to 0. You can see I can go quite high with my decimal places. Alright, we're going to skip over input, mask, caption, and go right to default value. We'll talk about input masks in the next lesson. The default value, we'll think about that for a second. If the majority of our albums are rated at, let's say, 4 out of 5, then we could make that the default value and never have to enter it. We'll only enter numbers that are not 4 when we need to. So I'm going to set that up as 4. Now there is an expression builder button over here that we'll look at when we get to validation rules. This can help you build equations and so on. Really, it's just simple. The default value is going to be 4. We'll skip over the validation rule and text and save that for later and come down to the required field. So do we have to have a rating? Well, it's set to no by default, which means we could leave this blank, but I'd like to change that. So I'm going to click down here in required and change that to yes, so that every album has to have a rating. So that way, whoever's inputting the data cannot skip over that field. They'll have to enter something here. Indexed, we'll leave it no, it's not a primary key, so we're not going to have unique values going in here. We're going to see 4s and 3s and 5s repeated throughout this table. Down at the bottom, we can also choose how that is going to be aligned in the column. Right now, general is the setting, but I'm going to click the drop down. I'd like to see those right down the middle, so I'm going to choose center. There we go. So we're making changes to the design of our table in our database here. We need to save those changes before we go and test this out. So data integrity rules have been changed. Keep in mind that when you've got a table that has existing data in it, that the existing data may not be valid for the new rules. Now, I'm pretty sure that it is, and I will continue regardless by clicking yes. Okay, so let's switch to the datasheet view and take a look at our table. Look at the ratings. They're all down the middle now. They do conform to a single digit and no decimal places, so we're okay there. We didn't lose any data as a result of making those changes to the field properties. Now, to enforce data integrity even further now, we can go to what's called an input mask. Input masks force people to enter data a certain way, and we're going to look at that next.